All right, we're going to continue our Clemson's Finest series. Guy to my left, most of you guys obviously know, you definitely know his voice. Don Munson, nice enough to come join us today. Don, appreciate you coming over and spend a little time with us.
Face for radio.
Face for radio. No, I wouldn't say that. I think people probably know your face and your voice. We're going to do a couple segments with Don this morning. This first segment, we're just going to kind of get to know Don, talk about his career and obviously the cool things he gets to do every day. But Don, let's start back at the beginning and talk about what brought you to Clemson and kind of how you came to become a Tiger.
Well, I guess what brought me to Clemson was actually a broadcast in 1993,
Really?
believe it or not. In 1993, I actually subbed for a good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Chris Allen, who at one time was the play-by-play voice for the Furman Paladins. And there was a game in November. I was not involved in doing football in the fall of '93. After I'd been the play-by-play voice at App State. I graduated from App State in '84, and then was their play-by-play voice from the winter of '84 through '91. But in '93, I wasn't doing football, so Chris called me and said, "Hey, I've got to be out of town. Would you mind coming and subbing on a football broadcast?" Great, love to do it. Mm-hmm. So came down and did the Furman game, and at that time, both Furman and Clemson were operated by what was WFBC back in the day. And so the guy that was kind of running both properties heard me do the Furman game, and he actually called me and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to work for Clemson in '94?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Cool.
So that's how I started. So my first gig was with Clemson was in the fall of '94, and started hosting the fifth quarter show is what it was, and it kind of evolved. Week one I was the host of the fifth quarter show. Then I got a call back, and on Monday following the first broadcast, "Hey, would you come in and do halftime in the fifth quarter show?" I said, "Well, that's fine. I'm there at halftime anyhow." Mm-hmm. So then after that, the next Monday I got a call. "Would you do pre-game halftime?" So yeah, okay, I'll do it. So within 3 weeks' time, I kind of expanded my role on the network and ran with it from there.
Well, let's go back to your App State days. Graduating 1 year and becoming the voice of the Mountaineers, is that right?
Yeah, the Mountaineers. That was
next year.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was, and again, that was kind of fortuitous. I got married 2 weeks after I graduated. Didn't have a job. Wouldn't recommend that to anybody. My wife still had another year to go at App. She was on full academic ride, so that made things certainly. So when we got married, we kind of figured, okay, we'll see each other on the weekends or during the week or something like that. But we were moving into student housing, moving here into student housing in July. Actually, late June, I guess it was. It was late June, and a buddy of mine called me from the local radio station there in Boone and said, "Hey, our sports director walked out today. If you're here tomorrow, I think that we can introduce you to the general manager, and I think we can get you the job." So bang, that's how it happened, and walked down there, and so became their sports director. Was also on-air personality for them. Started doing high school football, high school basketball. Was not involved with App State football that first year, but started doing play-by-play for App State basketball, and then ran with it from there, and then it evolved into the play-by-play gig. The first guy that I actually did App State football with was Mike Hogwood,
Really?
The late Mike
Wow.
Hogwood. So did a year with him, and then did a year with Steve Martin, who was
Another great name.
yeah. So play-by-play voice for the Charlotte Hornets, and obviously with the ACC for a long period of time, and so that was a lot of fun.
All right, so you've done all three sports at Clemson: basketball, baseball, and football. Which sport is the easiest to call?
That's probably a mixed bag, but probably, I guess, maybe the easiest to call would probably be basketball, to be honest with you, because you're not dealing with as many players, both on your team and then also on the opposite team. And obviously the action is a little bit more fast-paced in basketball. Love calling basketball games, and I've only been doing it for a couple of years now at Clemson, but just absolutely love doing every part of that. And also, already been to a Sweet 16 with this basketball team. Didn't quite
Went
make
to
it in the
Omaha.
end.
Didn't think you got to Omaha that way, did
Went
you?
to Omaha that way. That's exactly right. Obviously we didn't make it to the NCAA last year, but hopefully this year with what has just happened over the summer and winning the gold medal, hopefully that'll be a big catapult for them.
All right, obviously you travel all over the place as the voice of the Tigers for all three of the sports. What's your craziest travel story?
Well, probably my craziest travel story is what happened at the last national championship game, just because of that 4 or 5 day period that was there. Mm-hmm. So the Saturday before national championship game, I'm in Durham doing basketball game at Duke. So that was, I actually had a friend drive me up on Saturday, and he dropped me off in Durham, and I caught back up with Ben Milstead and Tim Beret. They had made the trip up, so caught up with them. Did the game Saturday at night. We spent the night there in Durham. We made it over to the Raleigh-Durham Airport on Sunday. Flew to Santa Clara on Sunday. So did the national championship game on Monday. Got back on an airplane. All three of us got back on an airplane in San Francisco on Tuesday. We flew to Syracuse to catch back up with the basketball team. Did a basketball game in Syracuse on Wednesday. Flew home with the basketball team. Got home early Thursday morning. So that's probably the craziest schedule that I've had the entire time I've been doing it, but loved every single second of it. We arrived in Santa Clara 12 noon on that Sunday, and if you, for Clemson fans who remember that Sunday there in the San Francisco area, it was raining sideways. I mean, it was just absolutely so. It wasn't necessarily the most pleasant weather, but then Monday turned out to be a great day, obviously, for Clemson.
All right, you've got the voice that everybody recognizes. Obviously, you travel around different places. What's the furthest place when you go, when you're in California or Texas or some of these places that aren't, close to Clemson, do people recognize you and say, hey, there's Don Munson? Or they have to hear you talk and then they're like, hey, there's Don Munson? Maybe
the strangest that I've ever been recognized was, and this was a while back, but my family, most of my family is on my mother's side. My dad had no living relatives, so all my family was on my mother's side, and they all live out west, Seattle, Montana, that area. So I was actually on a ferry going out of not out of Seattle, but just north of Seattle over to the San Juan Islands, and had on a Clemson jacket with my daughter. We were sitting out on the deck of the boat on the ferry as we were just taking in the scenes, and a guy came walking up to me. He said, "Excuse me, but aren't you Don Munson?" I said, "Yeah." So that may be probably 40 miles from the Canadian border, something like that, and had somebody walk up to me. I also had somebody walk up to me though in the Cayman Islands this year when we were there for basketball. Somebody walked up, "Excuse me, aren't you?" "Yes." So every time that happens, my wife laughs.
Cool. What's it like to, obviously, what you do, you get to build really good relationships with the coaches. Just talk a little bit about, we're going to get more into Dabo, but talk about Monty and Jack and Brownell and just some of those relationships you've been able to build doing this job over the years.
Well, I guess the beauty of it is not just with the coaches that I'm working with. It's the Michaela Franklins at volleyball. It may be Mark Elliott, the track coach. Probably a lot of people watching have no idea what the name of the track coach is. Mark Elliott is the head track coach. But so it's making relationships also with those coaches and their assistant coaches. Like the golf coaches in particular. I played high school golf, played a little college golf in my day, and so I've always had an affinity going that route and knowing those. So it's not just the guys that you see me, guys and gals you see me always working with, but it's the other coaches as well. That's one of the true advantages, I think, of working at Clemson. And when this theme of Clemson family is talked about, that's what we're talking about. And it's knowing their spouse, it's knowing their kids, them knowing my wife, them knowing my daughter Michelle, and that kind of stuff. So that's what makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, you get to experience the Clemson family,
I
a lot of folks don't.
Yeah, and it's a real concept, and it's not just a concept that's talked about, but it is a very true living concept.
All right, we want to thank Don for joining us. We're going to wrap up our first segment here with Clemson's Finest series with Voice of the Tigers, Don Munson, and we'll be back with more.